Hello everyone and welcome to the latest Squared Up Coffee Break. My name is Richard Benwell and I'm joined today again by Matthew Long.
Hey Richard, how's it going?
Yeah, very good. Right, so before these coffee breaks we put up a slide asking for people to vote on the topics we want to cover in the coffee break. And really the idea behind the coffee break is fairly sort of short, informal webinars just covering topics about Squared Up and SCOM and OMS in general. One of the topics that we've had a lot of positive feedback on and people have wanted to see is more information about role-based profiles and navigation. So I guess configuring Squared Up for different types of users within your organization. So Matthew, I think you put together some slides and some demos to sort of help us navigate through this topic and hopefully give the audience some good ideas about how they can set this up in their own environment.
Yep, absolutely. So what we're going to look at today is sort of role-based profiles. This was a new feature in Squared Up 3.1. And it really allows us to sort of take further our customization of Squared Up experience for different users. So we have a few discussions. The first one is on SCOM role-based access control, which obviously is a thing that exists prior to Squared Up. We'll talk about how Squared Up interacts with that. And then we'll look at sort of customizing the navigation bar and some dashboard authoring permissions. So covering that classic use case of I have a group of users, they want to have a custom experience. How do I deliver that without everyone having the same nav bar and sort of having to live by the same permission set?
Great.
Okay, so the first thing we sort of talk about is essentially that question of what can users inside Squared Up see. Now, by default, as you'll all know if you set it up, any users who have the read-only role or higher inside SCOM can log into Squared Up, and they'll be able to see anything that their scope inside their SCOM role allows them to see, because Squared Up uses SCOM as the sort of source for data security configuration. So what objects am I allowed to see? What tasks am I allowed to run? Am I allowed to put something into maintenance mode? All that kind of stuff. That's handled inside SCOM, and Squared Up doesn't touch that or extend that or make any changes.
So when a user logs on to Squared Up then connects through to SCOM as that user. So when Squared Up is connecting through to SCOM and asking for information about objects and so on, SCOM is filtering that all already to what that end user can see.
Yep, absolutely. So if you want to do things like limit this user can only see databases, you would use SCOM role-based access control to do that. And this is a sort of important point I wanted to discuss. It's very important here to balance information security with like sort of full stack monitoring. It's very easy to sort of go a bit too far with locking everything down with a scope and saying, well, this user can literally see these 7 databases and that's it. And it's like, well, actually, how does that help them understand how these databases fit into the wider sort of realm of monitoring? If they want to understand, is there a dependency downstream that's causing issues that they can't see it in SCOM? Typically, a lot of places, they might start blaming other things without actually knowing whether another component's up or down. So it's very important here when you're configuring these roles to think, okay, am I actually securing crucial sort of secure information that really shouldn't be available to everyone, or actually am I just sort of kind of obfuscating what the full picture of the platform looks like in case some mudslinging starts? And certainly in my experience, when you talk to users, I've been to customers where they've said, we don't want to let everyone see the health of our application because they'll just start accusing any downtime of being our fault. And then you go to the other half of the customers who say, we really want everyone to be able to see the health of our application because they keep accusing it of being our fault. If they can't see that everything's green, they might just assume it's red, and that leads to problems.
And you can layer role-based access control permissions in SCOM, so profiles. So for example, users who own a particular set of servers can have the operator rights on those set of servers that they can close alerts, put it into maintenance mode and so on. But in addition to that, they could have read-only access to, say, the hypervisor health state that those servers are running on.
Or maybe just the hypervisors that their servers run on, whatever sort of is most appropriate in this case.
And I guess the other point of discussing RBAC here is that fundamentally, if you want to prevent and or allow access to particular SCOM resources, you have to use SCOM role-based access control. That is what it's there for. So in terms of discussion of access control, it's SCOM still.
It's SCOM, Everything you use with SCOM, everything you know about SCOM, that still applies. What Squared Up profiles let you do, so they're not for data access control, what they let you do is customize the user experience of the navigation bar, so what that navigation bar looks like and the items on it, and then they allow you to customize sort of workflow privileges that you might grant users. So these users can only view content, these users can create dashboards, these users here have other administrative rights because maybe they're also as part of my team, but they wouldn't otherwise have that because maybe they're not a SCOM admin, something like that.
So two main pieces in the profiles. One, the customization of the navigation bar. So that's what dashboards they see in the nav bar. The second, permissions, but squared up permissions.
Yes.
Nothing to do with SCOM permissions.
Yep, absolutely. So if you grant users those permissions, then rip squared up out, nothing else would change in your environment.
Yep. Okay.
So let's actually apply that to a scenario. Let's say we've got, and this is a really typical one we see, we've got a set of users. They want to have a particular set of dashboards published onto their navigation bar, and these aren't relevant to everyone else. So rather than littering the nav bar, with hundreds of dashboard links that aren't relevant, let's actually just create a single set of dashboards that appear for a group of users, and they can see that, and it makes sense for them, and that's sort of their go-to navigation point.
So I think the demo you're going to show us, or the use case, is taking a set of dashboards on top of an application, and then publishing those dashboards out to that application team only.
Yep. Okay. That's the idea. So let's say, for example, and I'm going to sort of walk through how this is configured, but what we have is we have a Active Directory group, which contains all of the users for this particular application. And they are right now a little bit unhappy with having to constantly keep browsing around all these various different drop-downs to find it. So if I go to Settings and Profiles, what I'll be able to do is create a profile. Now, profiles are either, there's one by default called Everyone, and that, funnily enough, applies to everyone, and will effectively supplies your default dashboards. So that's where all the dashboards you see in the nav bar at the moment are currently coming from. I can click the Add button here to add a new profile. Profiles are based on either a user or a group. That's a Windows user or group, and that can either be local or that can be an Active Directory domain user or group, and that's probably what you're going to use. And I would advise you to use groups as well, because they're far more manageable. So if we have a flip this over to group and say scrub internal, so we need to type our group name. In my case, it's called OPP admins. If you don't quite type it right, you can delete them afterwards, so that's fine. So if I hit add, what I've done now is created a new profile. Now do note, it doesn't actually automatically flip to that profile, so make sure you pick the right one. There it is, OPP admins. And you can see now it's showing their blank navigation bar. And that's not saying they have no navigation. That's saying these are the dashboards that we added on in addition to any other dashboards that they're a part of, that their profiles are part of. So it's additive. If I'm a user who's a member of, like, for example, the SQL profile and also the Hyper-V profile and the IIS profile, I'll get the sum total of all of their dashboards on my navigation bar.
And of course, everyone is part of the default profile. So right now, if I log on as a user who is part of that admins group, I'll get everything in the default profile plus anything you're about to add into this profile. Which
in this case is nothing, but let's add a new one in. So if I hit the plus button here, I can now add in folders, so drop down items, or I can add in dashboards directly. Now I'm going to recommend, just to help keep things tidy, that it's probably a good idea to add a sort of top level folder for each profile, and then it's obvious where dashboards are coming from when you're looking at the navigation bar. So if I call this sales app, like so, and then I'm going to create a new dashboard under that. I'm actually creating a new dashboard here. I'm just going to search for an existing one. And this one's called...
Just to sort of stop you on, you kind of created a folder there, and it's a little bit subtle in the UI. So you typed something in, Squared Up was searching for dashboards that matched that, but you just clicked away, and that meant that it created a sort of a folder instead of a specific dashboard.
Or if I typed in, like, just something that didn't match with anything, that would also assume as well that therefore must be a new sort of folder item. So what that's done now, this user will have a sales app sort of top level item. Under that, I'll have this dashboard here called OPP service status, and also kind of add another one here. Let's say we'll add in the SQL 2014 dashboard. Now this is an existing dashboard that's not scoped to their particular application, but since role-based access control will apply and they only have access to their app servers, when they go to the dashboard, it will just automatically scope down the results to be their servers and nothing else. So I'm going to add that in, and again, let's just drag it over. So now it's a child of the sales app folder. And the third one I'm going to add now, I'm actually going to go and add a perspective, because this team have built a DA for their application, and they've got lots of perspectives configured on that DA, and they really want to surface that, and it's kind of tiresome for them to have to keep searching for the DA and find it that way. So I'm going to show you the other way that you can add profiles to perspectives. This is one way. This is great when you're initially setting up the perspective. Sorry, not perspective.
The other one.
The profile. So many P terms. So when you're setting up the profile, it's great to add a bunch in initially, but let's say in the future they say, hey, I'd really like a dashboard added. It's easier to also do it this way, which is to go to the dashboard or the perspective that you want to publish out. So in this case, I'm going to go to the sales app DA, which is there.
So you're drilling down into the distributed application object at this point,
Yes.
and then it has a bunch of perspectives, which we've covered in previous coffee
Yes,
breaks.
exactly.
Yep.
So if you haven't seen that perspectives, go back
Yep.
and look at some previous coffee breaks. I think it was 3 weeks ago we covered
Mhm.
that now. So I can hit the settings on this one. There we go. And I can say add perspective navigation bar. This will happen if you build a new dashboard as well. If I click on add perspective navigation bar, this is drop down and all these different items. Or if you've previously created a dashboard and done the same thing, when it asks you when you hit publish, which one do you want to put it on? Well, you can actually select different profiles here. So I can say the OPP admin's profile.
So that's the navigation bar that you had built already.
Yes.
Yep.
And I'm going to pop that in the top here. So they've got a nice availability item right there. If I hit publish, so that will show up. Now, proof's in the pudding. Let's log in as that user and see what we're getting. So you see, I'm not seeing that showing up on my profile because I'm not part of that group. If I go to my browser and start a new incognito tab, let me just grab the URL because anyone watching this previously knows I'm a terrible typist. And go over here. This always makes it fun typing in passwords live. Here we go. So because this is an incognito session, SquareUp doesn't know who I am. So I'm going to have to log in again. So SquareUp author. And did I type it correctly? I did. Wow.
So this user is part of
That group.
the op admins. Yeah?
Yes, so this user is part of the Active Directory group, which means when they log in, SquareUp enumerates all their groups and says, I can see you in this group, and that matches this particular profile. And if you look, I've got this sales app item up here,
Yeah.
and I've got my availability, my server status dashboard, and also I'll jump to the SQL one in a second and just show the role-based access control in action. So there we go. There's a dashboard they built that's specific to their app. Really wouldn't be relevant to have that everywhere else. And also if I go to the SQL 2014 servers dashboard, because of RBAC, they're just seeing their servers. So you don't even necessarily have to build brand new dashboards for the teams all the time. If you know RBAC's in place, you can just say, well, look, here you go. Here's a...
So in SCOM, you have configured that group of users to only see a particular group of objects or particular sort of servers, and hence that's all happening automatically by SCOM.
In fact, if I wrong one. If I go to that as me, see, I'm seeing a few more servers there. And I would have went to 2014, it'd be the same thing. I'd see more servers, but it's the same dashboard, and that can be quite good as well for reuse. Okay, so that's a pretty simple sort of use case, and you can imagine. You can imagine if I were to start creating lots of sort of profiles for different teams. That might start to add up if you use as part of multiple different ones. So by creating that sort of top level folder now, it's quite neat. I can see, okay, if I was part of the sales app and also part of the messaging app and also part of the finance app, it'd be really obvious. All technologies, SQL as a folder item, Hyper-V as a folder item, storage as a folder item, rather than having like 5 different server status or 5 different availability lines across the top.
Just going to kind of pause on this screen here because I don't think we've shown this in a coffee break before. Essentially what you did by publishing a particular perspective on a particular object to the nav bar is kind of created a shortcut straight into that object. So instead of having to search for that object or drill down to that object via some other dashboard, you've now sort of pinned that object and that particular perspective of that object into the nav bar. So it's got a nice shortcuts for users who need to get to those dashboards straight away.
I mean, typically you're a user in SCOM, you've got a workload. So you're a user in IT and you've got a workload. That might be a domain, that might be Exchange, that might be a group of servers. That's a really nice way to sort of pin that item, like you say, that one thing you always work with there, rather than creating a dashboard for it.
Great. Okay, good. So I guess that's hopefully covered how we publish out a set of dashboards to a set of users. I think you've got some caveats coming up.
Yeah, it's funny that. So that's all great, but one thing I really want to highlight with all of this is that what we've done here, we've put those dashboards onto the nav bar, but users can still search for any dashboard they like in SquareUp. We haven't actually hidden or controlled who can see those dashboards. We've just made some links for those users. So users can still search for any dashboard. So anyone can still search now for OPP sales app and see that dashboard. If you've got the more menu turned on, then users who have the more menu enabled, they'll just see it on the more menu instead because it's not published to any of their dashboard links. And if you have the URL for that dashboard, you can also browse directly to it. Now remember, RBAC still applies, so you can browse directly to the dashboard, but if you don't have access to those objects in SCOM, the dashboard will be empty. But yeah, this is not a way of saying only I can see this dashboard and I've hidden it now. It's just about customizing the user friendliness, if you like, of the navigation
profiles
bars.
are not access control.
Yes.
Actually, one question that's come in from the audience, which I think is probably worth covering off. You said when a user logs on to Squared Up, we look at the AD groups that user's in. Is that recursive in the sense that if a user is part of an AD group that's part of another AD group, Squared Up will see that group?
It does work, yeah. And that's actually how I've configured that. So typically we tend to see people, I mean, in this demo later, you'll see that the user just added, that group is part of another group, which is called Squared Up read-only users, and that user is part of another group, which is then SCOM read-only users, and so on and so forth. So it handles nesting just fine. So let's move on sort of with the sort of that's the first use case covered. We've got a bunch of users, they want to have some stuff on their nav bar. That's great if you're, got infinite time and resources, but realistically speaking, especially if you're the one-man SCOM guy, you probably want to delegate some of this. If you've got hundreds of teams, hundreds of applications, and they all want different dashboards and different look and feels, you can't be there all day long, changing every single dashboard for them and publishing their nav bar. So Squared Up user profiles can also be used to control who can publish and author dashboards. So typical scenario, the application team, the sales app team we were just working with there, they now want to create their own dashboards and they want to customize their own navigation bar. And we can let them do that using that same profile. Basically in the UI, we have a bunch of permissions that we can add to that profile. Let's say these users, anyone as part of this profile is allowed to perform these operations. And again, much like the navigation bar, it's additive. So if I'm part of a profile that says you can create dashboards and part of another profile that says that you can edit dashboards, then in sum total, I can create and edit dashboards. So typically for that sort of use case, I've got a team where I trust them to be able to create dashboards and publish them into their own little sort of profile, but not to anyone else's. There's a couple of permissions I can apply. Under the authoring tab, and you'll see all this in the UI in a second, I can grant them the ability to create, edit, and publish and delete dashboards and perspectives. Now, the create perspective by itself is actually quite handy because if I say you can create and edit dashboards, but you can't publish them, all they can do is create drafts. And you're the only person who can see your own drafts. So it's kind of a way of saying, well, actually, you know what, you can create your own personal dashboards, but no one else can see them. So that's quite a nice sort of way of enabling that sort of, it's almost like in the SCOM console, you've got the My Workspace at the bottom where you can create any views you like and no one else can see it. Well, that's a way of doing that here as well. So quite good for people who want to play around with the dashboard, and then maybe once they've configured it, you're going to decide whether it goes live or not. And then edit's fairly self-explanatory, allows you to edit dashboards or perspectives. And then publish is the right that lets you actually make it available to everyone else. Now with just the publish right by itself, all you can do is make it live so that it's searchable, it appears in the more menu, and it's available via a URL. You can't actually put it on a nav bar. So there's a couple of other permissions you might need to do that. And the most sensible one to use under advanced authoring, there's one called edit own navigation bar. And what it basically says is this profile, so let's say my OPP admins are allowed to edit the OPP admin's profile. So they can opt for the navigation bar for that profile. So they can add, whatever dashboards they like there, and it won't affect anyone else because it'll only affect members of that particular profile. So that's the most sensible one to enable. So we're now going to have a look at this actually in the UI, but effectively we're going to allow this team to create dashboards and perspectives and publish them. Okay, let's flip back over. Here we go. So if I go back into settings and go over to their profile, make sure again I've got the right one selected at the top. I don't want to give everyone the ability to do this. If I scroll down beyond the navigation bar, you see I've got this permissions section. The top one, authoring, enables me to allow people to create dashboards, edit existing ones, publish them. I'm not going to let them delete dashboards just because I don't want them necessarily to be able to remove stuff. Or the other problem, of course, is that if I say delete dashboards and they delete something that they created, they'll then come and ask for me when they delete it accidentally. So this way, if they want something deleted, I can do that for them. And likewise, I can say that they can unpublish stuff if they no longer want to see it on their nav bar. So now they can kind of get rid of it, and then I can clean it up for them later. And likewise, I'll let them do the same thing for perspectives. Now, obviously, perspectives don't appear on the nav bar, but perspectives are only applicable against certain objects. So they can only really create perspective against things that they have RBAC control for. Since those things are probably things within their realm, it makes sense that they're able to go and put a perspective and say, when you browse to this server, it looks like this. And likewise, I'm going to give them unpublish but not delete, just in case they go and delete something they didn't actually want to get rid of.
You're very cautious.
Well, let's just say I've been there and I've had those. How do I get this back? I spent hours working on it. We know. Delete mistakes happen. Okay, and then under advanced authoring, I'm going to enable this edit this navigation setting. So I'll say, yep, for this profile, they can edit that and put whatever they like on it. Now, there is another permission here called construct sensitive queries. We've talked about this previously in the SQL coffee break series that was part of Service Manager. But just to note, that's what lets people create and use like the web API and SQL tiles. So if you want your users to be able to create and edit those tiles as well, they'll need that permission too. But it's a bit sensitive, so...
Yeah, so it's off by default, and then you should consider it because essentially that's letting anyone with that permission use the squared up identity to query SQL databases, any SQL databases you've configured with the connection strings, and any web API connections you've created with the web API tile.
Yeah,
so
that's not something to grant to everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right.
Okay, so that now should apply. You don't have to, there's no save button or anything. But with some permission changes, you do have to get the end user to log in, log out again. So over here, I'm just going to hit log out. There we go. And now if I log back in again, there we go. You should see I've now got the plus button. So now I can create dashboards. So I go and just create, and I'm going to create literally a 5-second dashboard here. It's going to be really boring. Maybe it just shows server status.
Yeah, but just capture the important point. You've logged back in again as the same user who didn't have that plus button before, at the top there before.
Exactly, yeah.
You as an admin just changed their permissions. They've logged back on. Now they can create their own dashboards.
Yeah, so let's put the group here to order.
This is probably another good example of RBAC, right? So you were scoping it to a group.
Yeah.
You would only be able to see the groups that you have permissions to view in SCOM. So when you're doing your sort of searching and dashboard authoring, you'll be scoped to a sensible set of groups and objects.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In this case, this user might be this user does have access to other things as well, so it made sense to limit it just to the group. Because I said all servers, then I would still actually see servers from other apps. So that's fine. So there's a dashboard. It's really boring, but that's not the point of this demo, right? And if I now hit publish, because they have the publish right, I'm able to add that, and as you can see, they can only add it to this particular profile.
Nav bar, their own profile, yeah.
So if I now drag that onto here and hit publish, we will now see this appearing under Sales App. There we go. Now, and just to exercise the point I was talking about with how this dashboard is not obscured from everyone else, if I flip back over to my normal user and refresh this, I don't have the Sales App sort of top level folder showing up, but I do have that dashboard showing up under the More menu. Now, the More menu, just to sort of cover over this because people do ask about it, the More menu shows all dashboards that are published that are not part of your navigation bar profile. It's toggleable for each profile, so you can say like these users have access to the More menu, these ones don't. So it can be handy if you've got sort of power users who are able to look across a lot of the environment but don't want to have a million items along the top. And SCOM admins, because SCOM admins have every permission inside Squared Up automatically, they will also always have the More menu on. So like if you log on, you're the Squared Up admin and you log on to the system and you see the More menu, don't panic. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else does. It's just that you can't have that right taken away from you. So when you're testing this stuff, I definitely recommend create a dummy user account that's just a member of the profiles that you need, so you can actually be sure that what you're creating actually matches what they can see. And that goes for SCOM RBAC as well, right? When you're creating that, have a dummy user account that you can move around between different profiles.
Yep, great, good advice.
Cool. So that sort of shows you doing that. And like I said, they can now create perspectives as well. So if I were to jump over to my Sales App again, they're able to add a perspective in on this particular object now. There's the little plus on the ribbon over here. And likewise, they can also now, the cog has appeared so they can edit any existing dashboards that they might see. If they didn't have the publish right, they could edit that, but they can't necessarily make those changes live for everyone else to be able to see them. So that's how we create profiles, sort of enable customization. Now we've really pushed that sort of delegation of responsibility off to our end users, so we can actually start getting back to our actual other jobs that we have to do, because no one's really just running SCOM and nothing else. Or if you are, you're probably doing it by yourself.
All right, great, fantastic. I think that's sort of the end of the demos you had planned. A couple of more questions come in that I think probably worth covering off.
Sure.
One is people spotted a really nice fancy Visio diagram there.
Yeah.
Back. Can you just switch back to that? And it's not really part of what we're covering in the coffee break, but I guess it's worth just
yes, I
going
can.
back to that and showing that off.
Yeah, I actually people who we'll see this dashboard coming up in an upcoming video I have on the Visio tile and things as well. So
promoting your own
yeah,
content, Matthew, is shameless.
Got a flag. There we go. So there's a Visio diagram here that shows off a server rack, and then you can click on any of these health state icons to drill down into the particular server.
Okay, so that's created using the Visio tile, and there are videos available. Right? We've got another
There
one
will be
coming out
soon, yeah.
just about how to kind of create that, but essentially it's a Visio diagram, and you've wired up some of those icons to the health of SCOM. So we'll kind of cover that off in videos and possibly a future coffee break. I think another kind of question that came in, which I think we sort of hopefully have covered, but it goes back to that construct sensitive queries, or whatever that sort of
construct sensitive queries.
Yeah, does that permission? So if you give your users access to the dashboard designer, using those authoring permissions,
right,
they can add the tiles that are available to them in the dashboard designer, which means that they can add in SCOM performance data, status data alerts, and so on. But without that permission, they can't start adding in arbitrary queries to your SCOM database, for example,
right,
or even your data warehouse. Okay, so without that permission, you can just use the off-the-shelf tiles, as it were, so status and so on. But that particular tile, which allows you to write arbitrary queries against your database, would not be available to them without that permission. So, if you are considering giving your users dashboard authoring rights, and you are concerned about that, which you should be concerned about, probably best to hold off giving them that permission, and then that they can only just build dashboards containing standard SCOM data, essentially.
Right. Absolutely. Like you can see, if I tried to actually finish configuring this tile, it wouldn't let me. And they can still edit and configure the rest of the dashboard, just not that one tile.
Yeah.
So you can always then do that for them if you need to. It's definitely worth considering that permission and what it can actually do. That said, we talked about this previously. If it's a really sensitive account, it probably should only have read-only access to that database anyway, but you still might be concerned about things like transaction locking and stuff like that.
Great. All right. Fantastic. I guess it's probably worth sort of noting that we are live. We do take questions coming in from the audience via the questions chat on GoToWebinar. So hopefully that was good use of that, and please do sort of join us again and use that facility in the future.
So if you'd like to help direct the topics that we're talking about in the future, please head to squaredup.com/topics, where you can fill out a survey and tell us what you'd like to see in the coffee break series. This episode is proof that we do actually listen to that survey and do it, because we got overwhelming feedback that you guys wanted to hear about this, and hopefully we've covered that and answered those questions for you. If you want to go and see what's coming up next in the next few weeks, go to the Coffee Break Series microsite on squaredup.com, and you can see what we'll be covering over. We've got a really cool episode coming next week, which I know we'll plug in a second. And if you want to get the slides and recordings for this, then you can do so via our blog. Everything's published there. The YouTube playlist for this series is available online, because we're going to keep referring back to previous episodes. If you haven't seen them, I'd highly recommend go back and watching them. They don't quite run as long as this one's going to do, but there's definitely worth watching, and there's a wealth of good content there available. As Richard mentioned, we are live, so if people on the webinar want to stick around and ask us questions, our technical engineering team is online, as well as myself and Richard, and we're more than happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Great. I guess, but with that, you sort of mentioned next week, there's a special coffee break. SquareUp will be heading off to the Midwest Management Summit. That's at mmsmoa.com if you want to sort of check out that website. That really is a really exciting System Center focused community event. It's off in lovely Minneapolis, which I've not visited before, so I'm kind of looking forward to that trip. So we'll be there, and then we'll be doing a live coffee break broadcast from that event. There are loads of well-known, sort of familiar speakers at that event talking about topics across OMS and SCOM, so hopefully we'll sort of grab one or more of those guys to sort of join us on the coffee break as well.
But a couple of guests lined up.
Please do join us live and see what's happening in the world of System Center at the Midwest Management Summit.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right, great.
All right, thanks so much, guys.